Okay.
And then we'll go live. Hi, everybody. It's Conscious Medium Brandon Ross and
it's astrologer and life coach, used to be psychotherapist, Penny Dix.
you had no idea how much of this would actually help you in the long run with all your psychotherapy. So listen, I want to thank everybody for all the comments, all the reaching out. It was, again, another great video. Do like and subscribe both of our pages. We both definitely have a different flavor with how we approach some things. I have my June forecast coming out here in a couple of days where I do tarot and astrology together. I hope you guys enjoy it. Penny is really consistent. Your Geminis are really, they're a lot of fun.
My June is up there.
Yes.
My new moon in Gemini is up there for Monday the 30th. It's already up there. So yes, please subscribe and all of that.
So a little bit of everything for it. And of course, every day we you know, when you first pull together and you're like, meeting of the minds, let's figure this out, let's do some things. You can't help but have to become topical, because if you're going to do this on a regular basis and a weekly basis, I mean, that should kind of affect some things. And I'm a big fan of the dialogue being you know, progressed. And I think this is our opportunity to really kind of examine tragedy and kind of world events against astrology. We are fresh off of the latest Texas shooting here in the United States. And you said something very interesting to me this morning, and maybe you can start off by talking about the perspective of, you know, gun control in Europe. You said, why do you have so many damn shootings? Like, there's so bloody many. And you wanted my perspective on like what it is. Is it really this dangerous? Well, it's certainly, there's certainly a fear factor there, but what's, you know, when a European hears that there's another school shooting in the US, what does it sound like to you?
Well, it sounds pretty terrifying. It certainly makes me very hesitant to visit the United States, for example. Even though I lived in New York for a year when I was in my mid-20s, but I have to say, before I went to New York, I was quite actually nervous about it, because it was that time when you'd hear about a lot of muggings or knifings, as it was.
This had to be like pre-84. Sorry, I'm not trying to date you.
It was.
I'll just kind of say it that way.
It was 1980.
Okay, so this is before Giuliani, and part of the reason why, and again, this will give you perspective too, part of the reason why Giuliani had such a cult status and a mythos to him is because in the late 80s, he came in and he cleaned up the city like there was nobody's business. So like he was this sun god for a couple of years, and you know, prior to you know, or what I should say, contrary to popular mythos, he was not the mayor of New York City when 9/11 happened. He just was the first one to grab the bullhorn. He should have not done that. That would have hurt him. His astrology is another day. But yeah, I mean, it's, you know, the US takes a lot of pride internally. It's kind of not that we're insensitive, but there's like this eye roll of like fear. We're just like, oh my shit, like, why are we doing this again? How do we not, are we not educated? Are we not understanding it?
Well, I'm going to be controversial here, because I was watching Sky News before we started tonight, and they were in the Sky News reporter was interviewing the governor of Texas, and he did not like what the Sky News reporter was saying at all, because he was saying, look, this doesn't happen in Europe, because we don't, you know, basically we don't have guns. So there has to be some kind of, you know, correlation here or link with this. And the governor got very upset, very angry, and said, the United States of America is the safest place to live in, with the best potentials for anyone. And I thought, you know what, you're not selling it well to me as a European, because it does make me very hesitant about visiting.
It's the expectation that if you're packing, you're safe, you know, and it's a broader issue when it comes to consciousness, because there is a fallacy that if you have a gun, you're safe, or if you have, if you have protection and you have this stuff. And also, even if you have laws, I've made the argument that this has more to do with, and I'm not negating the fact that we don't need more controls into the gun stuff. And as a red-blooded American, there's a belief system that you need to have your freedoms. Well, in this country, we have lost every freedom that we thought we had. First of all, freedom and the concept of anything that you are free is absolute bullshit. There is an energetic denomination on the other side of that you have to give something up to that. Part of saying that we have a freedom of guns is that people can get a hold of it that aren't fully there and might use it to hurt somebody in a one-on-one, in a mass shooting, in whatever. When we talk about things like, the choice, this whole thing about Roe versus Wade and abortion and that sort of thing, when you say, well, we're not really in a free country if that's taken away from us, then what you're also doing is that the exchange of that is that then what you get is that you have more government control over certain things. So not only there's a balance of the energy here, it's an exchange of energy, it's a return on energy. And the reason why I think it's such a compelling topic when the astrology happens, the first thing I went to was when the Columbine shooting happened in '99. And then when we were talking about the shooting here in Texas, is Uvalde.
Yes, it was in Uvalde.
Yeah, you only pronounce half of it around here, hon. That's just how we go.
But it's interesting because when you suggested we discuss this astrologically, I was very reticent about it because I said, look, I'm European and I don't really understand all the gun laws in the United States. It's not an area that I'm comfortable with in commenting on. All I can tell you is that when I found out that my ex-husband, who was a Pisces, had a gun, he was German, it scared the life out of me.
Well, and doesn't that also, you're mentioning that he's German. I'm not trying to highlight anything inappropriate here, but do you find that Germans are kind of like, they're still on guard? And do Eastern Bloc countries, especially now that you're seeing, the crap in Ukraine, like, aren't you getting ready? Finland and Sweden joining the NATO and the EU community expanding. You said it best. That's a double middle finger to Mr. Putin to be like, oh yeah, we don't trust you, buddy. Yeah, that's right. I call it 11-11. 11-11. Huh?
Yeah.
but
so I don't feel kind of confident to discuss the American problem with gun rules or gun laws because, as I said, it's not something that's ever come up for us here in Europe, although I'm sure people do, and obviously the sort of the criminal element will have access to weapons. But it's interesting, and I started off, I was saying to you that if you compare, I'm just trying to find the picture, if you compare the school shootings that have happened in the United States with school shootings that have happened in Europe or around the rest of the world, this table I found said the United States had 288 school shootings. I'm not sure of the time period. Mexico had 8, South Africa 6, India 5, Nigeria 4, Pakistan 4, Afghanistan 3, Canada 2.
All right. Listen, as an American, I'm going to point out that some of those countries, you're not really sure what they're shooting at or they're defending. Fairness. Like I'll be the boorish American for 30 seconds here. But that being said, though, what that tells me is that this is an access issue, right? And the people that are talking about the gun law components, listen, clearly there needs to be something in place. There's checks and balances. This kid turned 18 and had a gun the next day. Hello. He had no training. He had no safety training. He had no. Meanwhile, they can get in a 2,000-pound car and run somebody over, and the state has no problem taking responsibility, saying he has to take licensing before he gets behind a vehicle that could be used as a weapon. So we're now we get down to the really kind of nitty gritty in the core. And I'm just going to take a couple of more minutes before we talk about the astrology to talk about the politics of it. And what's interesting is, I think it's the following week, the NRA, which is the National Rifle Association, which is the primary lobbyist for all of this, is holding a convention. Donald Trump is speaking at it. And here's the bombshell. Are you ready? You're not allowed to bring your gun to it. There are no guns. You will be patted down. You will go through a metal detector. You cannot carry the same firearm that you're fighting for. But then again, there's only bad gun owners. So there's, in their own right, they're caught in their own diametrically opposed, opinion of the situation, and have to own the fact that it's dangerous to own a gun when you've pissed people off. And trust me, this has been a lot. And listen, we've talked about some of the moon activity. And by the way, we go back and we watch our stuff. Did we not call the assassination attempt on Putin? I mean, listen, that's still the energy we're dealing with here. And last thing with it is that there's a legislation, and I pulled it up so that I didn't get it wrong. It's HR 8 and then HR 1446, which I find very interesting of the numerology attached to this. One is an 8, obviously, and the other is actually a 6. And what they basically do is put in process and controls on a federal level across the country. And what you're actually seeing with this is that, Texas shoots it down, Republicans shoot it down. You basically got the lobbyist group kind of putting people in their pocket. And when you have an imbalance where there's more Republicans than Democrats, you just only get the Republican agenda. You don't get the Democratic agenda, which is the problem. On the flip side of that, you have these Texas senators that have basically eaten crow, and they meet with victims and they just kind of shrug their shoulders and they go, yeah, no, we're still not going to vote on that, because if we're going to be the greatest country in the world, we can't limit that. While they cash a serious paycheck from the NRA, who, by the way, is still under investigation for fraud, for tax evasion and fraud. Just to kind of give you a little bit of a lay of the land there.
Can I ask you something?
Sure.
Is it Mr. Trump who said he didn't want guns at this gun convention?
Well, I mean, listen, he's still talking about a fence for somebody else to pay for it. Can we?
I just wondered whether he was concerned for his safety.
The likeliness of him getting reelected is real. His proponents that illegally marched on January 6th, and by the way, I'm not a Republican or a Democrat, I just call it like I see it. They illegally stormed the Capitol, and people died because of it, and nobody was held accountable. Meanwhile, he was the one saying, go down there and march, I'll be there in a minute. He's a spineless turd. He just speaks at whatever he feels his whim is at. His chart is coming up next. I really have to release this. Like this chart, I'm going to send it to you first so you can see it, and I want you to do a review of it. Oh, that would be a fun thing. He has such megalomaniac stuff that this is the same guy that said he would stand in the middle of Fifth Avenue, the busiest commerce road for retail in the United States at one time. And he said, I could stand there and shoot people in the face and still get elected. Like, we're a warlike country.
What education is that?
Listen, Penny, we are a warlike country. That you want the summary of what we are to the US and European. We are a warlike country. Even when we are faced with problems, we declare war on it. Like we declared a war on drugs and a war on poverty and a war on, and we tailored a little bit different, but it was still a war on poor education, that no child be left behind. Meanwhile, we have an opiate addiction like epidemic in this country. Not a day goes by, and I talk very sparsely about this, but I've been included in some investigations as a medium to help the police find the bad guys. I'll just say it that way. I'm very clear with which side I'm on. And listen, they're shutting down trafficking out of New York City and Boston and Montreal and Buffalo and Philadelphia, DC. It is insane how much stuff and how readily available it is we don't really care about drug addiction in this country. We don't really care about gun shootings. We care about the agenda, and somebody is getting paid. And there's a compromise here that's being unspoken. It's the reason why we haven't declared war against Russia to say quit attacking Ukraine. We're compromised somewhere, you know, and we can kind of, what are the rules here? Can we kind of like give them some weapons? Can we give them some tanks and some planes? Okay, we're going to do that. It's almost like we have to make permission. So then to be like, you're not going to reveal us in that way. But we're compromised on such a level. The planets are going to expose it. That is the end. The point of all of this is that eventually the planets are going to show it. We're going to cyclically go through this. And when you and I do our special on Pluto returns to the US, I think it's, here we go. Here we go. So listen,
Pluto, the next hit of the Pluto return to the United States is in the first, I think it's during the first 2 weeks of July. So
we got to get ourselves together on that.
It will return to the point it was at when Putin invaded Ukraine. And that was the exact time of the Pluto return hitting the point in the US natal chart of when the country, or the declaration of independence, wasn't it?
I didn't catch that. So what you're saying is that the day that Putin invaded, Pluto was doing its dance, and then it started to retrograde. It gets back to the same point.
No. So Pluto was, when Ukraine was invaded, Pluto was conjunct the degree that is in the natal chart of the United States of America for July the 4th, for that particular Pluto point, when it was, you know, we discovered it. And so that was all about independence and a restructuring of the way that America was running itself at that time, unless I'm wrong.
Yeah, it's funny. And actually there's a twist to this too. It may be July 2nd, because that's when it was ratified. But depending upon, listen, we're talking about.
So what I'm saying is that Pluto has been going direct through Capricorn. Pluto started going retrograde, I can't remember, it was a couple of weeks ago. So Pluto is now retrograde. By the beginning mid-July, it'll be back at the same point again. Wow. So you think of the date in February when Putin walked into Ukraine, this is the same point that it was at then. So usually with these transits, you get like 3 hits. So the third one, I think, is round about New Year, Christmas time. Yeah. And that would see, I feel that brings some kind of resolution. It may not be what we want, but it'll bring some kind of resolution. But in July, we are going to see something coming up again, whether they actually try to get together to, you know, if Putin is really realizing that he's, you know, the Ukrainians are just not going to give up. They're going to fight to the last man.
Well, and you know, isn't there something to this that, you know, the Brits also started to realize, like, the US just wasn't going to give up. Yeah. You know, in the Americas, we were very, you know, constrained with that. So I think there's some similarities in that. And by the way, that also then lends itself to say, you can't take my guns. You can't tell me what to do. Like, I'll just succeed from you. And there's not practical application of compromise. That's actually a real thing. Like, we've got a real problem in this country of being wronged. And there's this phenomenon called the Karens. When a Karen gets like upset, you know, that there's only 4 ice cubes in her iced coffee, and then she wants to talk to the manager, and don't you know who I am? And I'm a powerful person. And as much as you want personal accountability, as much as you want personal responsibility, and there is something to be said to, you know, vote with your dollar, Karen, go somewhere else. People get so offended and so not right-sized in these arguments that they don't see the trees through the forest. They have a legitimate point, and it's this big. They make it this big because this is their platform. Putin is doing that right now. I think Great Britain did it in 1776. I mean, I genuinely do, because I think it was kind of like, nobody messes with us. Like, what are you doing? You know, King George was sitting there going, what the heck? I live about I live about 40 miles from Lake George, and it was named for King George. And there was one half, it's a fascinating story. When you visit, I'll show you.
Okay.
So you had Fort Ticonderoga way up north, which was French controlled, and it was managed by, it was kind of like, there was kind of like how it changed hands. And then you had Fort William Henry, which was kind of the battleground of seeing them before they come down from Lake Champlain through Lake George into the Capital District, which is a stronghold. It was a possible whatever. I'm giving you a history lesson here that's not necessary. But it was mockingly named Lake George because George is like, well, clearly they like me. He just named a lake after me. And then they said, it's the feminine George. And that's when he went, oh, send in more Hessians. Like, that was just kind of how that all went. But let's take a look at some charts. I think this is I think our conversation is good. Was there any other points you wanted to make before we look at the recent school chart?
Because I think that the points I've already made about the Pluto return are very significant in the chart that I pulled up earlier for the Texas shooting.
Yeah, let's see this. I'm going to share this. Yeah, this is our screen right now, and we're looking at it right here. What you guys are looking at is May 25th, 2022 at 11:32 Central Standard Time. And we are in the tropical Placidus. By the way, guys, we used direct houses for a lot of our analysis. We do that not to complicate things.
Right.
Take some head-on astrology first, get this really good, and then understand the nuances of the other ones, whether you want to do Vedic or what have you. So boy, oh boy, is this chart busy with, and it's kind of, my quick observation is it's got this bowl effect, much of like what we had at the eclipse, but look at all of that action in Aries and Taurus. Oh my gosh.
And it's fixed. You've got Leo opposite Aquarius, you've got Scorpio opposite Taurus, you've got a really fixed chart. This is not going to move. This is stubborn. This is, rigid, because, and as you say, when you look at what's going on in Aries and Taurus, again, Aries wants to go. Aries is cardinal. Aries is fire. And the energy that was in Aries for that day, for that time, even the moon was in Aries at the time of this tragic event. Mars was at the 0 degree of Aries. So it was at the beginning of the zodiac. That's really significant because it's done its way round. It's been all the way round. It's come out of Pisces into Aries, and it's applying to be conjunct Jupiter. What do we know about this? We know that Mars is the god of war, action, aggression, assertion. It can be energy and sexuality in more positive forms, or even that could be distorted. But right. Jupiter, of course, enlarges all of this. Jupiter is expanding this energy with the moon in Aries as well. Conjunct Chiron, the asteroid, which is the
let's talk about that from the healing energy part of it. And by being if you're in your mid 40s and to early 50s, you have a Chiron in Aries. So right now you're going through a lot of stuff. You're going through a lot of like personal, you're overcoming hopefully a lot of personal challenges, but the repeat keeps coming up. And Penny, here's the dialogue that I'm going to share with you on this. That Chiron returns becomes a very important thing for us in our cycles, the midlife crises, the just all that garbage. And when it happens in your house, that's really important. The Chiron aspect here in conjunction with the moon would typically signify healing, though. But we can't always assume that there's not an agenda behind it. What do you think it is here with Chiron and moon together?
Well, I wonder whether America in general is, through this tragic event, reaching that tipping point where it's been much more on world news than any of the other shootings, I have to say. Yeah. I mean, it's been prime story on Sky News in the UK all day. Now, for 2 days. That's
Penny, today, when we're filming this, we're on the 26th. Today was their last full day of school.
That's right, because they were breaking up for the summer holidays.
Right before Memorial Day.
But what I want to mention is the dwarf planet Eris in Aries, because this dwarf planet. Eris is the goddess of strife and discord. Eris represents people out on the streets shouting the odds, protesting, rioting because they're not happy. It's conjunct Venus, which is about values. You know, Venus is in Aries, and that is about value. I feel in this particular occasion. I don't know what you think, but
well,
I think and story.
And when I look at the numerology of it, the 2445 for the asteroid here, we've got, here is our 6, here's our new beginning. We're looking at, also 6 with Venus and new beginning. So I think we're really, maybe, hopefully, if we're going to be positive about this won't be in vain. I got to tell you, though, it still pisses me off. Like all of this has been preventable. But now when you look at the stars, you look at it as in like, it's kind of like when you do the same thing over and over again, you're like, oh, I'll deal with it later, or I won't deal with it, or it'll just go away. And then it comes back again. The condition in the sky was going to happen again, but the shooting didn't have to. We could have forwarded the agenda in a different way. We could have forwarded these things. If we had healed on this, maybe we might have gotten to some other things that we could have healed with. Like, and that's the thing that people don't understand. It's like they treat it like a vacuum, like it's the only issue. We've got a lot of things we've got to heal from as people. We have a lot of things we have to really kind of wrap our head around and use astrology to connect with. You have a chaos mechanism, you have a healing mechanism, you have a chaos mechanism, right? So you have Venus and Eris, and then you've got Chiron and the Moon, and then Jupiter and Mars. What's that?
I mean, Jupiter and Mars, this is, the positive side can be that one has loads of energy and wants to kind of get physical and get out there and jog or get into bed. I'll just throw a bit of humor in.
Right.
But
get along now. That's what she always says to me, everybody. She goes, just get along now. What does that mean? Oh, go buggering. It's not that simple.
But I think what we have to look at is the aspects that both Saturn in Aquarius, Pluto in Capricorn are making to retrograde Mercury in Taurus, because Saturn is making a really hard square. That's a challenging angle. Saturn is about rules. Saturn is about law. It's squaring Mercury that's retrograde. It's saying tough talk. It's Taurus. This is again value. This is about our personal values, our world values. And it's tough talk that has to take place. It may be interesting to see what happens when Mercury goes direct, which is round about the 3rd of June. So that's mid next week, towards the middle of the end of next week. And then we might see something transforming coming from that Pluto trine, which is an incredibly helpful angle to Mercury, which is saying this has to transform. If the American system can't take this event and use it to turn it into something that changes the situation, in a positive, constructive way that keeps all sides somehow in harmony, because ideally that's what you want. You want to find a win-win situation. But they're going to have to let go of a lot of the old ways.
Well, I'm going to be American for 30 seconds to tell you that ain't going to happen. We really like our lessons right up front. We're all about. Did you just tell me what to do as a European? Are we not a sovereign state? Are we not a sovereign country? You can't come waltzing in here with a bunch of German soldiers and paid soldiers and try and take over our country. No way. I got a Ted Nugent solo telling you can't.
And do you know that's what that governor of Texas was saying to the Sky News reporter when I watched it earlier? And
It's an ego breaker. It's an ego breaker. This is an ego breaker moment. And I'm going to tell you what I see in this. You've got Mercury in the 10th house in retrograde, and then you have Saturn in the relationship house in the 7th house. It is literally saying you need to break up. This is breakup time. But and in this case, on a personal level, you're like, okay, this isn't working out. You let go of that person in the office that isn't working. You let go of that person that's a fringe, that is, you're just not going to progress with them. This is a time where you also have to let go of old patterns. That's what this is significant to. That's what the houses speak to me here on, because, not only that, you've also got North Node action going on here. Yeah. The North Node is sitting there in the 10th house. And
conjunct Mercury.
Yeah, of course.
It's our destiny. It's where we're heading towards.
So we are going to change. You can either drag you behind my Ford truck, or you can get in the driver's seat and say, this is where I'd like to go. I think that these politicians are actually in for a rude awakening. This country knows how to protest appropriately. Before I get misconstrued, there is so much revolution connected with this energy. It's not even funny.
Yeah. An
assassination attempt is going to happen in a chaotic country like Russia, right? That misinformation is a disease. When you're in an organized situation, it is standing up and using your voice and saying no. When you're in a dystopia like we are in the US, it's a conversation of saying, we're going to push pressure on you until we get there. We have a way in this country to make popular opinion into a monetary event, such as when somebody does something wrong, you put pressure on the sponsor, so they drop the golfer who did something wrong with his wife. You're the football player or the whatever. Like, we put pressure on the mechanisms of money, and we're there. That is a peaceful yet direct outcome with this. Can you imagine if we all stopped paying taxes at once? Just an idea. Like, if this was a Starbucks, take Starbucks off I don't want to get this. By the way, Starbucks, has more lawyers than the US government. But if your mom and pop establishment did something wrong like this and wouldn't do what you want to, you just wouldn't go there anymore. Why do we support even the idea that we're even a good country when we haven't made this change? So Penny, you point out beautifully that this is a time of healing. This is a time of actionable change. And the stars are showing that right amount of chaos for the rebellion. Love it.
It's also about service. It's about service to each other. This is about respect for each other. You've got to look at that Pluto in the 6th house. The 6th house is about service to others. Pluto is about
in retrograde.
This is about how we treat each other, how we treat our work colleagues, because, I've had some clients recently from the States, and it's been very educational listening to some of these people talking about the gun laws, and obviously it's sort of been educational for me because it isn't an area that I've ever needed to become familiar with, because it doesn't apply to what's happening in where I'm living, in Malta and Gozo, or when I was in the UK. So there's something about, what I picked up from these clients, by the way, was a collective fear, a real fear about even letting their kids go to school.
Of course.
Of
course. Well, you do know that the economy of energy is what is going to be prevalent now, yes. And if you can put fear into the conversation, then you can control people. We've lost religion, right? Religion is no longer.
That's what religion did. Religion put the fear of God into people. If you don't do what I say, you will go to hell.
So now we need other tactics like, this is the worst thing ever. Well, listen, so here's a fun fact that people aren't talking about. I know no less than 20 people that have COVID right now. And guess what? They're home, they're drinking fluids, they're taking their vitamin C, their D, their zinc, and you know what? They'll be back next week. If we all got sick at once, the most people that were like normal, the problem was the hospitals couldn't get the compromised people.
Exactly. That was the problem.
So it really wasn't about the overarching thing of people perishing. It was the most at-risk people perishing. And listen, okay, for right or wrong, that's the path that we took. But fear became the mantra. Now we're hearing about, what is it? Monkeypox. You know, I got the monkeypox once and I was in college. Oh, yeah, it's kind of a long story.
Monkeypox if you get up and close and personal to someone, so I understand.
I should have asked if she had traveled outside of the country.
If you start eating lots of bananas, you'll know.
She had eaten a lot of bananas. That was actually the problem. I'm only kidding. Absolutely none of this is true. It is just for comedic value. Nothing has ever been compromised. Fair enough. Anyways, but it's, you know, but this whole idea of the cyclical nature of our opportunity when tragedies like this happen. So the stars are showing the condition. The stars are showing, okay, the condition and the opportunity, and also in cyclical pattern, because when you get the inside planets, the interplanetary, the interpersonal planets, the Mercury, Venus, Mars, by the way, all three of those played a part in this. One is conjunct with Jupiter, one is in opposition to Saturn, like they're all doing their dances, right? The dynamic then is that then you look at other things as well. And I want to pull up the chart. It's not as intricate as yours, but it definitely proves its point here, is the Columbine.
Okay.
You know, and when we look at this chart, you know, again, we've got a ton of opposition where in stark contrast, right? You really kind of have that bowl and a lot of conjuncts and a lot of whatever. But then you also see where the astrology plays in here, where oppositions come into play. And by the way, conjunctions tend, and again, this isn't a given, but it tends to accelerate it towards solution, where opposition tends to propel it into chaos. And again, that's just been my observation and my years in astrology. I know you have a little bit of a take on this too, but
yeah. Well, I just think it's interesting that Jupiter was also in Aries. And of course, Jupiter has just returned to Aries.
Were we just not talking about Jupiter returns?
Yeah.
So here we are, first trend right off the bat, Jupiter returns. And again, this is kind of in its second tour. So it's about 11 and a half years. We say 12 for sake of argument, depending upon how long the retrogrades are, but it just got into Aries. And it was just about to leave Aries. So we're kind of like on that cusp there. But
the ascendant's the same. It's a Leo ascendant. It's the same as the Texas. And what's interesting is you've got the moon in Leo opposite Uranus in Aquarius. Uranus rules Aquarius. Uranus is about shocks, the unexpected. It's about, you know, it can be explosions and, you know, horrific things, as well as eureka moments and great huge awakening and awareness. You know, and I think it's important to make the point that all these energies have a light side, a bright side, as well as this dark side. And this is the whole thing with astrology. When you go to an astrologer, they can show you how to use the energies in the best possible way for you, rather than sinking into the dark shadow side of the energies.
Yeah, and it's funny, sometimes that, you know, that dark night of the soul, we go through it whether we want to or not, that shadow period, that shadow understanding of it. And, you know, the moon in opposition to Uranus here, first of all, no retrogrades going on during this time. No retrogrades. So it's funny when people say to me, oh, there's no retrogrades going on. I'm like, like, I got to get to the office. Something's going to hit the fan. Like, and they're like, what? And I'm like, well, people can't be focused in on improving themselves because they think everything is right. You know, when astrology goes all direct, it's kind of like the patient that quits taking the meds because they feel good.
Yeah, yes, yes.
How do you like that analogy?
Spot on.
Well,
I don't need these anymore. I feel great.
Yeah, it's like, oh, they did their job. I'm all set. And they're like, you're supposed to just take that every day, buddy. I haven't taken it in 3 weeks. And you're just like, oh, that would explain a lot. And they're like, let's go to a concert. And you're like, well, I'm good. But it's your favorite band. And you're like, I don't want to go with you. Anyways, So, but you've also got Mars and Jupiter in opposition.
Yeah.
So here's an interesting thing. So you've got Uranus and the moon, where in this current in this current situation, the moon is conjunct.
It's conjunct Chiron.
With Chiron for the healing.
Yes.
Right? So we could make an argument that between Columbine, and by the way, from 1966 to 1999, there were less than 10 school shootings, and none of them were as massive as this. A lot of them were about an ex-husband, an ex-girlfriend, an ex whatever, and the shooting got out of control and a kid might have gotten hurt. There was only one other time in history, and again, don't call me out on this. Go ahead and comment below if you guys want to share that experience. But school shootings really did not become a thing until Columbine. And Jeremy has spoken, thank you very much, Pearl Jam, because it was about the frustration of, like, you come out of this harrowed home life. And I have made the argument time and again that it is more about mental health than it is about a gun, because you can hurt somebody with anything. The gun control is necessary, but can we start talking to the root cause of mental health? And I'm going to point this out, where when you have the opposition of Jupiter and Mars, there is a conflict of explosion. Yes. There is a conflict of necessary means for that conflict. I am in no way, shape, or form justifying this. I am in no way, shape, or form encouraging it. But I'm here to tell you now that it's historical. We can look at the chart and say, this was very necessary that something came out of that day. And what's your interpretation of this, of the Mars in Libra, and then, the Jupiter there? Because I don't want to leave it to chance here.
I'm also curious because the fact that it was virtually the same time of year. The sun is now in Gemini, but of course the sun in the Columbine shooting hadn't quite left Taurus, so it's the same time.
It was the last day of Taurus. It was the last day of Taurus.
Yeah, and you've got Mercury in Taurus, but Mercury's direct. So you've got such similar energy, but you've also got this trine from Pluto down here in Sagittarius, and of course Jupiter rules Sagittarius. So you've got this kind of layering of so Pluto is the planet of very simply transformation and dredging up the gold from the bottom of the muddy pond, and it's trining the moon in Leo. So there was something there was the possibility of people in general, so the collective, being able to change habits, change the ways that we feel, that we think through this event. Now, if that didn't happen or didn't happen enough, then as we know with the cosmos will keep bringing energies that create the same or similar dramatic situations until we get the point. And that's why I wonder whether this Texas shooting is that tipping point for the United States.
Yeah, and it's funny, Jupiter is in the 9th house, which is higher education here.
Yes, of course. Yes.
And then the 10th house, the career part of it, Sun, Mercury, and Saturn, right, are sitting there.
Rules. And Uranus, of course, is in the 7th house. So upsetting relationships.
So you kind of see where the astrology becomes like very pertinent into this.
Yeah.
And you're also your moon's in rising right here in your first house. And it's a Leo first house. Like it's, this is just an action plan. And by the way, I used the timing of the shooting. I used, all of that. To me, if I looked at this as somebody's personal chart, as like a true natal chart, I would say, this trine with Pluto to the moon to to the action with just Saturn. Let me just sit with Saturn here for a second.
Yeah.
You want to disrupt values. You're going to get emotional. You're going to get over your skis. and it's sitting there in the 5th house with this. And by the way, Sagittarius in the 5th house is just unpredictable. Can we just get there for 30 seconds? Right. And then you have, because you have things like addiction at extremes and, all of that stuff. And Pluto is like, I'm going to find power in doing something extreme. So Pluto sitting there in the 5th house, you have the moon energy trying to this, to, of course, wanting to take out some sort of structure. Well, to a bunch of high school kids that are disenfranchised, there is no greater target than school.
Yeah.
Right?
And you've got that Saturn in Taurus is squaring the moon in Leo. So it's actually squaring the ascendant as well. So Saturn is really coming down with a very big, heavy, heavy hand.
Or it's being rebelled against with a heavy, heavy hand. So Pluto is like...
Eris was probably still in Aries back then.
Aries are assholes.
Aries.
The shit I say and I should get in trouble for. But you're right, though, because I mean, whenever I see, squares and trines and, really kind of look at this. So you have the gentle energies and you have the trines and you have the sextiles and you have the purpose of that gentle energy. And then you have the direct conjunctions and the oppositions to be able to really kind of push and pull things along, right? And
what year was Columbine?
99. It was 99.
Oh, shit. It's in the other ephemeris. Hang on, let me get this. I just want to see where Eris was. Oh no, this won't tell me. No, forget it. It's okay.
Well, we'll keep looking that up, and I'll keep talking here too, because you also have Uranus and Neptune.
This ephemeris doesn't have the smaller planets. So
okay. So you've got Uranus and Neptune, and what's interesting to me is that even though they're both in Aquarius, you have the anomaly of, as we explain to people often, the astrology moves at one pace, and then the houses move at another pace with a different shape and a different side. That's why it's not exact and direct. You have Neptune in the 6th house, which gives great concern to personal safety and what have you. And again, on the negative side. On the positive side, it's time to do something about where you want to go, and it's time to take a hike and all that stuff. And then you've got Uranus sitting here in the 7th house, that relationship piece of it, but both in Aquarius. So Aquarius representing kind of the humanitarian side of things and understanding that we have to kind of get there. This is an astrological calling card to get our shit together, in my book. Absolutely. In my book. And I think that there's a peaceful way to go about this, and it's not through laws. Sorry, guys.
And the same with the Texas shooting. It's another nudge. It's another, come on, people, wake up.
And I think, but here's the part that I posted on my personal Facebook page. I felt that it was more about, someday we're going to start to realize that this is more about mental health than gun control. Yeah. I knew exactly what I was posting. It was thought out. I wasn't trying to pick a side. I was trying to explain. I was just trying to put the 2 words in one sentence and not really tell you where I stand, except for the fact that maybe we should pay attention to mental health instead of the gun control. It sparked a wildfire of comments and contributions. And some people were very, let's just say they were over the top with their defense of guns and how it's used politically and that sort of thing, which is the goal now on the political spinsters to kind of be like, this is our chance to get it passed, and this is our chance to get political whatever. And then on the flip side of that, the mental health part of it, which, by the way, we're here in Mental Health Month. By the way, March, part of the reason why Mental Health Awareness Month became Mental Health Awareness Month was the Columbine shootings. How we doing, everybody? So you've got both of those dynamics. It was one of the things cited that we needed to bring it to the forefront. And some of the analysis was like, the guns are the first thing that have to go. First, you have to kind of like treat the patient for the wound, and then you get to the root cause. They're not wrong. Okay, get some gun legislation in it. But if we could talk people out of being crazy and give them outlets where they can discuss their feelings and not feel emotionally whatever, and have parents actually do their job, with things. And a lot of this stuff comes back to parenting. It starts in the home. Oh, wait a minute. Hold on a second. Did I just bring up that it's an Aquarian responsibility to start to take on your own mental health and keep the people around you and you love safe and secure and help you feel very mental?
Yeah.
We keep trying to solve our problems in Piscean ways. Our government has to protect us. Our legislature has to go. I think it's still important as we do this bridge merger. But how about, I'm going to teach my kids that guns aren't supposed to be used this way.
Well,
That's Aquarian.
I think it's about education, as you say. One has to then look at the education that kids are getting in school about all of these topics, also about history. What is their history education? So, you know, and also, and I felt this for a long time in terms of mental health, that has to be somehow included in the school education system. Children or young adults need to be taught how to recognize when their thinking is unrealistic, when their thinking is not kind of grounded. I think if this could be addressed, and as you say, it starts at home, but that's also the problem because the parents are also the result of the education system that they've come into.
Yeah, I mean, as someone that does mindfulness in the classroom work, and I have seen improvements, I've seen improvements in this for the last 5 or 6 years where there are mindful moments. There are, I just don't have enough hours in the day to still be actively working with this, but it's great when I walk into my kids' school and they're doing, okay, everybody, time for mindful moments. We're going to take a deep breath in. And what you're really talking about is self-regulation. What we're really talking about is understanding emotional IQ and being able to apply it. I think the teachers have really, at least here, what I see locally, and this isn't across the country, New York is ranked slightly higher than all the other states in terms of educational knowledge and application and that sort of thing. Still don't get it right, but that's not what the show is about. But I have seen the improvement where we begin to reflect on the emotional value. That my fifth grade, my son who's in fifth grade, his teacher every morning, she said, point to which one you want. And I'm like, what the frig is this? What the frig is this? Now this is my second tour with this teacher, had the older one in there, pretty well. I knew her growing up, whatever. And she goes, go ahead, point to, which one do you want today? And I look up on the board and you could be like, you could just get away from her. You can get a fist bump or you can get a hug. Which one do you need today? And I sat there and I taught this stuff in class, and it does so much emotional reinforcement to know that, first of all, she's going to ask you every day. Yeah. Second of all, she's not going to ruin your boundaries with, you got to hug me today. And then she'll also, she also gives the opportunity that, do you need a few minutes? Wonderful teacher. My kids have been blessed with great teachers, because they've always took in the emotional concept, the emotional value part of it. All of them. We had a kindergarten teacher that when our oldest one showed up, he was 4 years old. He was early into kindergarten for all the wrong reasons. And he was an emotional, powder keg. Adoption, we were his seventh home. If it wasn't for her beating the drum during the day for us to reinforce it at night, we would not have gotten there. We just wouldn't have gotten there. And so I will vouch for that, but I'm going to go a step further. And again, I know that we just had a shooting in Buffalo that was in a supermarket, and we've had things in parishes and whatever. It's just not schools, but it is the education.
That's true. Yeah,
is the education. So why do you think that Europe is so, and I know that they just have strict gun laws and they just don't exist. Yeah. But you had mentioned there was one mass shooting in Norway in
Norway. Yes. That was back in, I think it was 2017. I can find out.
I vaguely remember that.
Yes. And he was a right-wing extremist. And he just went to this island where about 60 students were having a kind of adventure weekend, I guess, sort of camping and living off the earth and all of that kind of stuff. And he just had a gun and he went round and popped them all off one by one. And they'd be running and screaming, trying to get off the island. He'd shoot them when they were in the sea. It was, so yes, we do get incidents like this. And certainly in the UK, there have been one or two incidents, and
but it's so much limited. I mean, we're talking, you know, since Columbine, we're over 100 shootings. Like we're not, you know, go big or go home, right? You know, you're talking a handful, which, okay, is human nature. So this does come down to things like the laws. Yeah. And it also comes down to the mental health.
Yeah, we have more problems in Europe from terrorism, from the sort of, you know, Islamic. Oh, hang on, my watch talking to me. We have more problems.
You said the magic word and they're like calling. They're called. We're gonna get banned. We're gonna get banned if we keep talking about this. It's like, you know, is that a call from Tehran? Is that what you're doing right now? I'm sorry, Iran. Like, clean it up yourself. Don't.
But yes, so there's much more fearing in Europe, although lesser at the moment, in the sense of sort of like somebody setting off a bomb in the underground station in London. Those are the kind of things that we have. We had a big Manchester bombing, so we get bombings. We don't get shooting. We get the bombing, and they, you know, take out a whole.
So now I'm going to be the pro-gun guy, and I'm going to say, see, people are just going to use whatever it is that they can find. Don't take away my guns just because somebody else doesn't know how to use it. And people are going to use whatever. So even if you get rid of the guns, we're going to start using bombings and blah, blah, blah. And one of the Timothy McVeigh, who was part of the Oklahoma bombing, which was just beyond senseless. He was a military operative, actually, you know, before he went rogue. And one of the dynamics, and that was in '96. And one of the dynamics that he talked about often was how disenfranchised he was with the system and the process and everything else. And when I think of like bombings in Europe, I almost always go to religious zealots.
Yes.
Not necessarily political zealots. And here it's almost always, there's not an agenda. That's why they're called senseless shootings. Like this kid was 18. This kid turned 18 on May 23rd, you know, May 22nd, and he had a gun the next day. And he was pissed off because his grandmother yelled at him for having a cell phone bill too high. Like, that's mental health. That is not religious. That is not like purposeful meaning. You know, the guy in Norway, right or wrong, and again, wrong for shooting people, at least he was trying to stand for something. At least he was trying to say, like, I'm doing this in the name of whatever political belief. Yes. I'm bombing the underground because of, you know, the hostages and whatever. Yeah. And, you know, it's funny. I think I know more about, when I was growing up, I think I knew more about European counterculture and the bad guys from Hans Gruber in Die Hard movies, because he at least stood for something. And by the way, that's how they got stuff done. Here's a deeper question, and this is a European and an American kind of, you know, conversation. Why do you think that and you've got to own this for the sake of the argument, your expression in Europe is more about bombing people and more about being attached to something greater? And why do you think in the US it's senseless shooting of emotional IQ immaturity 90% of the time? Why do you think there's such a contrast and difference as to why they're happening?
That's a really interesting question, because I think the thing is with the if you like, the bombings here, they are for a religious reason. And so there's a purpose, there's an intent. It's not a random mental health issue in that sense. But a lot of the time, the terrorists in Europe, to the best of my understanding, have been groomed by, you know, guys.
So brainwashing, so conditioning.
So again, you could say it's mental health difficulties.
Do you find though that a lot of European laws will like speak to the idea of that conditioning and of that, you know, and I'm not going to highlight Muslims alone, but there is that mindset of a terrorist organization being Muslim. There are several others, you know, look no further than Northern Ireland, but you've also got this conditioning of trying to put in pride to be able to be your reason. You know, do you see laws kind of trying to subjugate that at all?
Well, you know, what I'm thinking is that because you've got a collection of countries which have unique cultures in Europe, which are the kind of the sort of the bedrock of what got spread out in our current civilization, if you like, across the world, whether it was to the Americas or whether it was to, you know, Australia. But I mean, and I know that America obviously has a very multicultural system because originally you were all European.
Yeah.
On the whole, you know.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, and listen, by and large, I have this wonderful melting pot life. You know, I really do. Like I own a house in what is essentially a Polish Ukrainian neighborhood. There is a Polish mass said every, you know, once a month. I mean, they've limited it now because of the lack of priests. But, you know, there's that. And then I grew up on the hill, which was the French side of it. And then there was Italian. Like literally my city had 7 parishes in it and spoke to 7 nationalities. Italian, Russian Orthodox, Polish Ukraine. And by the way, they made it very clear about 2 years ago that they were both Polish and Ukrainian. And then there's the Ukrainian Orthodox, and then there's the Russian Orthodox, and there's the Greek Orthodox. And it's for a city with only 15,000 people, we've got a lot of denominations here. You know, we had the Italian, we had we even had a French Canadian. I mean, it was overwhelming, quite frankly. And then of course you had St. Patrick's, don't you know? You know, that's the Irish. And and the reason why I'm saying this is that, you know, even when I look around, it's like, you know, I have a doctor who's, you know, who's Arabic, who's from Tehran, actually. Here I am kind of joking about it. I have another person, you know, the dry cleaner is from Croatia, you know, and, you know, just it's small talk, you learn these things. You know, somebody that works at the pharmacy, she's from Belarus, and she stopped me. She said, I saw your videos. She goes, I got to get my mom out of there, don't I? And I'm like, I don't know. I don't know. I can't answer that for you. So it's, you know, like when I do these things and I talk about international things, when I hear about it from people that I know, they're like, you know, I'm from Belarus, right? And I'm like, oh, I've known that, you know, and I'm like, I know that. And then she goes, my mom is still there, you know. And I'm like, okay, I should get her out. And I go, oh, okay, all right, let's kind of go there. And it's funny. I know you didn't want to talk about this today.
No.
But I think there's value in it, and I'll give you, you know, my perspective why I wanted you in on this, because the rest of the world sees us as these bombastic jerks, and we're really not like that. We have our moments. We have our leaders that are unchecked, and we also have our people that are unchecked. But as someone that sat with a family that had lost their child at Sandy Hook, I'm here to tell you, you would have no problem saying, here's my gun, if you sat with this family. If you were able to hear the other side of this from a child that comes through. And from a reading standpoint, I was very specific. I'm like, he was wearing this. This is what his room looked like. He's showing me, you know, where the cookies were that he used to steal. He liked these little wafer cookies. I mean, like I got really specific, and it's what you do as an evidential medium, especially for family and bereavement. And now I met with them probably about 4 years afterwards, and a lot of things were wrapped up. And they were going through a divorce at the time, and there was a lot of guilt on both of the parents' parts. And he was excited at the idea that he had 2 families again. You know, dad had found somebody, mom had been seeing somebody. He was actually excited about that. And the family, the mom and dad were like, oh my gosh, like, okay, we can stop feeling guilty about that. The part that turned my stomach sixfold was that here is a mom and a dad, regardless of their situation, they were actually put on trial. They were put on trial. They were put on under oath. And I don't think it was ever televised. If it was, I think it would be all over the internet. They were cross-examined by the defense attorney for the shooter that also represented the insurance companies, which also represented the school district. Like there was some combination here. Penny, what I'm about to say will turn your stomach. During their cross-examination, their questions were things like, what did he eat in the morning? Who tucked him in? How many hours of sleep did he get? Oh, so what you're saying is that he had slept in one bed one night and then another bed another night? Could it be said that he didn't really know what safety was anymore? They villainized the family on the stand to minimize their losses. Because what they were really getting at is, well, you didn't really care for your child. Why are you putting it on the school district? You were already at fault. It's disgusting. Like I literally, it wasn't a reading anymore. You know what I mean? When you do this work and you do a reading, you know, an hour-long reading, you leave a little time at the end in case you need to be a little personal or whatever the case may be, but the business is at hand, right?
Yeah.
I spent 3.5 hours with them. And they rode together and they drove up from Connecticut and they were the kindest people, and what they saw in each other was really important, that they were like, we just went through this and we were able to do this. Even though my emotion isn't there with you anymore, I care for my person, you care for your person, but we can still come together here.
Yeah.
And my encouragement to them was that they were bigger than this tragedy. And the father said, no, I'm not. He couldn't get out of his own way. He said, my life stopped. He said, the only reason, he said, I'm with my other person because we were at a point where we were making decisions and I was starting to move on and she was starting to move on. And he said, I'm stuck there. I can't get out from underneath it.
Yeah.
Well, the pure mental health part of it it's not my expertise. I can coach him on decisions and spirituality and where he wants to go with this chart, but I got him connected with a very good therapist. He had already been seeing someone, but he needed something a little bit more. He needed somebody that kind of understood, who, by the way, actually, I'm not going to give a shout out into this, but it is not uncommon that you psychotherapists have an appreciation for astrology and biofeedback and mediumship and intuition, but you will never look at these worldwide controversies until you sit with a family and connect with their loved one and say, oh my gosh, this broke them. This broke their spirit. This broke their soul. This broke who they were. And I have sat with a lot of families who lost someone in 9/11. I mean, I'm 2.5 hours away. And when I would sit with them, first of all, I want to go back to I'm going to be a little bit graphic here. When the child showed me how he passed, he said, I felt really warm and the lights went out. That's it. He didn't even know he got shot. He did not know what actually, he doesn't even realize he was part of something bigger. All he realizes is, I don't get to go to dad's tonight, right? When I've sat with 9/11 victims, families, the feeling was always, I'm not a conspiracy theory person anymore. Because when somebody in passing, when a spirit tells you something and you're like, what the frig is this? I have had more people tell me of the popping sounds that they heard as the buildings came down on them, which lends the theory of the explosions, the detonations on the inside. I'm just telling you what spirit told me. By the way, I want to believe that we just had a snafu in our security system. I want to believe that there was a snafu in things. You start to kind of realize, like when dead people speak and they tell you the truth, I mean, if I was to go out there and go on a crusade about this, about 9/11 and the towers being rigged, I'm going to be diminished. But
Yes.
I'm telling you, they told me they had no reason to lie to me.
No.
And by the way, I had actually, we're getting off on a tangent here, and I don't mean to, but it's an important thing. I remember this because the mother, I kept referring to a dream she had about him coming to her. And when I started to explain the popping, she said, he kept telling me popcorn in my dream. And I'm like, he was trying to tell you that there were explosions.
Yeah.
Right. And when you connect with people that have died in tragedy, we've got to start to apply that there's a bigger purpose here. We just do.
Yeah.
Nobody's expendable. And as spiritual people and spiritual leaders, we have to realize, like, we have to ready this stone. Like, there's something here. I think that's how you and I got connected. I really do, because I think we need this kind of point of view of both sides of things without being too political, but let's keep the bigger picture in mind. The stars are going to keep starring.
Yeah. And it's making it real and accessible. And, I mean, I'm aware that we probably need to start bringing this particular dialogue today to a conclusion. So
we're here. I got you.
I wonder whether it would be helpful if we try and just connect with that bigger picture, because it would be a terrible shame if we left this on a very sad note. I think we have to be able to connect to that higher vibration of energy, which is that, something good can come out of all these things. And I can hear all the people shouting at me and saying, but my kid's dead. And I know, but oh God, it's hard, isn't it? Because there is a bigger picture, and you, as you say, you talk to spirit.
Yeah.
And I have my own experiences of talking to spirit. And once you are able to connect with that energy, and once you have your evidence, and I've been given evidence that just kind of like has blown my mind.
Yeah. Oh, listen, and that's a really important thing, because not only does it keep you modest, but then you're also just like, okay, thank you. There's no way I could have even dreamed that up. And I got validation. Validation's where it's at.
Yeah.
For sure.
So that there was something that came to me the other day, which is about, I think it's a kind of Buddhist way of thinking, but it's about complete detachment, that actually nothing belongs to us. Mm-hmm. Energy flows through our physical body. Energy comes to us and through us. Energy, the life force, in a sense, our life doesn't belong to us. It is coming through us. It is the soul's expression through the physical of this just, we're part of such a bigger picture of such it's an energy that is just almost impossible to verbalize, because and the problem is we get so detached from it, we forget that we are actually all interconnected. So one hurts, we all hurt.
Well, and that's actually very shamanistic, and it's and the reason why I'm bringing this back around into this. I mean, what were the Mayans aside from shamans in Mexico? What is Stonehenge if not built by the shaman druids of England? We have to start acknowledging the idea of balance. That's really what we're getting to. And it's that balance. I can talk about the detachment of Buddhism. You use a technique called tying the day off, where you review your day in meditation and you say, these are the things I did well. These are the things I need to do better. These are the opportunities that I'll have. I'll put it in a book, in a bag. I'll tie it off, put it on the shelf. I'm not disregarding it, but I can no longer do anything to affect the income, the outcome, or what have you. And what you do is you take those lessons and you move them forward. Now, the idea of shamanism and this really does tie this entire topic together. When you look at things like justice, you look at things like balance, and a shaman culture has a panel, if you will. It has the council, right? Shamans, traditional shamans, really don't see the difference between male and female bodies, but they do recognize male and female energies. Mm. And then they look at it from a utilitarian standpoint to be like, Penny is ill, therefore we are all ill. What do we need to do to make Penny feel better? How do we coach her up? Instead, we look at it in the United States anyways, and I think we do in most cultures. What's wrong with Penny? How do we get rid of Penny? When we lose Penny, we're going to be stronger, aren't we? So, no. The shamanistic way is to say, how do I care for Penny and bring her up and help her join the tribe again in her full glory?
Reconnect.
Right? So it's about connection. It's about understanding that everything has value. And Penny may come back and say, I can't do everything I used to do, but I can still do this. And then the tribe says, perfect. Now we have an opening. Penny used to do this, but we need somebody else to do this now. Who's up for it? Oh, you know what? I've always wanted to do that. Okay, well, learn from Penny how to do it and go do it. That's what the shaman is. That's kind of where we're going here. Because the punitive damage judicial system is horrible. It is horrible energy.
And the problem is that we all live in our individual little boxes, if you like. You know, there are so many people that live alone. You know, the family unit is stretched. You get a mother with a son, or you get a father with a son, there's so much disconnection of just the collective that I read something on Facebook just before we came on, which was about how women of a village would always get together and do the washing together in the river. And then suddenly they got washing machines, and suddenly depression became a big problem because they'd lost the ability to connect with each other and have that community and have that dialogue, which we actually 100%. All need.
Well, and look at what we just went through with the pandemic. We no longer had water cooler talk. We lost water cooler talk. You know, we lost that sense of community and the BSing and the whatever. And then it became this part of like being in our head. We're going to get back to it, Penny. I really do. And listen, I love your take on things. You know so much about astrology. You know, you're always a lesson for me, and you're my heart with this. And, you know, we want to thank you guys for joining us. Like and subscribe to our pages, please. It keeps us going, help us grow our numbers and get out to more people. I have some announcements about doing some pay site work with YouTube. I'm actually going to have a subscription service. And we're also going to have some of the behind the scenes stuff with Penny and I. You okay with that, Penny? You okay with that?
Oh,
not that. It's got to stay. It's got to stay PG. But no, I mean, it's time for me to expand with this stuff, and I know your foothold is really growing. I'm proud of you. I'm proud of you. You're taking advantage of this, and you're really doing well with it. So
thank you. Just thank you so much for, well, you know, the way we got together was just really by chance, but of course nothing happens by chance. And so I'm really grateful that we've made this connection, because I think professionally we can have some very sort of
Seventh house Aquarian. Seventh house Aquarian. Our relationship.
We haven't done our charts yet.
Yeah, that's. Oh, wait for that. Wait for that. All right, guys. Listen, thank you so much. We're going to give each other the heart tap to care and love for one another. If you like my shirt here, if you got light, click on the link below. You can get your own. I'll see you guys soon. Penny, I'm sending you one. All right, I'll see you later, love. All right. Bye. Bye-bye.